Summer Moon Utah Wells is 6 years old. She turned 7 February 4th, 2023. She was reported missing at 40 pounds and 3 feet tall. She is likely 45 pounds and nearly 4 feet tall. She likely has 1 or 2 front teeth missing. Likely her front right tooth would be rotted all the way out by now. She had a shorter than pixie cut at the time of her disappearance and blonde hair. She was reported missing from the 100 block of Ben Hill Road in the Beech Creek community of Hawkins County, Tennessee. Here's a picture of her. This is the last known photo, I believe, right here. Besides the swimming hole, which I believe was verified. I don't think this was, but this is allegedly the last known photo taken of Summer Wells. And here is another photo of her right here, where she's awake. And you can see her blue eyes. And if you just Google some pictures of Summer, you can see even better pictures of her. Her home was 110 Ben Hill Road in Rogersville, Tennessee, where she lived with her 3 older brothers, her mother, and her father, being Candace Bly and Don Wells, and her grandmother, Candace Harrer, known on social media as Grandis, who lived in a camper on the property. Summer Moon Utah Wells loves puppy dogs and kitties, princesses, and Paw Patrol. Her favorite food is said to be French fries. She is said to love the song Godzilla and My House. She seems to be a fun-loving girl that enjoys nature and has a connection with animals. Summer is a very precious girl, and she is still missing. There is still an active Amber Alert for Summer. Nobody knows where she is. Well, somebody knows where she is. Somebody or somebodies know if Summer is okay. Somebody needs to come forward and save her. Let's get into a man and his journey that he dedicates to Summer Wells and her 3 brothers, picking up right where I left off after my last live. Okay. Tim Mullen's Journey, Part 3. Robin the Bread Lady. Tim starts off talking about the old train station in Kingsport. He shows a map with the train station and shows how everything surrounds it. He calls it Church Circle. He continues talking about how everything fell apart during the Civil War and they had to rebuild the whole area. He talks about the clock tower, points it out specifically, says he has been in there, shows minimal footage from inside the clock tower, then finally starts talking about the bread making, which is where he met Robin, bread making at the Seventh-day Adventist Church, which makes no sense because how did he already have her number? He says at first that he met Robin at the bread making, but he also says Robin is the one that invited him to the bread making. So make that make sense. Unless he means where he met Robin, as in he physically met with her there, not as in the first time he ever met her was there. You'll hear. He says he saw her at the parade, but did he meet her there? This was all during the Fun Fest week in Kingsport. He says this was about the 3rd piece of his Summer Wells journey. The first being the newspaper, the second piece being the Fun Fest parade, and the 3rd being the bread making.
It's called bread making.
Bread making.
You could learn how to make bread. And it was going to be at the Seventh-day Adventist Church. It was going to be at the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
It was going to be at the Seventh-day Adventist Church. We got that.
And so on that day, I'd done various things, but I went to that function. Then there was another big one about the same time, but I wanted to do that because bread making sounded unique.
So there was another big function going on at the time, but he wanted to go to the bread making because it sounded unique.
For the news and for the city to have. And
for his news site.
And so I went to the Seventh-day Adventist, went inside.
I scrolled down through these images because he says he takes all these images of people without asking, and they didn't seem to care, but they might have cared, so I'm not going to show their faces. And if I do accidentally scroll up trying to see if he's done, and I might show a couple faces here and there, but I decided to take that part out.
Start photographing. How do you say it? Lo and behold, there was that other woman walking with Candace in the parade.
Robin.
And she introduced herself as Robin. And that was really my second meeting. We talked just a little, talked about the parade. Can't remember.
So he said this was really his second meeting. He's talked just a little, talked at the parade or talked about the parade.
Really much of what we said, but got a lot of footage.
Can't really remember much of what they said.
But he got a lot of
footage.
I commented, bad place to come when you're hungry bread making and you got to wait for him to make it and cook it.
Oh.
And I had to take off to go down to another function, some big outdoor shindig dance, wahoo. And
he had to go next door to some big shindig dance, wahoo, he says.
I think maybe I'd left. Maybe they'd offered. They said we could make a loaf if you would.
He can never remember for sure what's going on, but he's there. He specifically says he went there because he wanted to go because it was something interesting and different and unique. But he went there because he was recording it for his news site. He thought it would be something unique for his news site. So you think that he would go there, like paying attention, trying to make it professional, but he doesn't even remember what happened when he was there. So was he even paying attention? Was that really why he was there? Or was he there because he wanted to see Robin? You know what I'm saying?
Would like one. And I may have I gave him my number. And so while I am at the shindig, and
so he said he gave them his number. So he gave Robin and her husband, I'm assuming, when he saw them at the parade, his number.
It was a big outdoors thing. I did get a text that said, got some bread ready.
So he did meet her at the parade. Because if you gave them your number, then you met them, right? Or are you just running around like a creep, just handing off your number to women?
We're getting ready to leave here. I can drop it off somewhere. And I thought, well, that's like kind beyond measure. And it was actually Robin that texted. And I thought, well, gosh, if they're going out of the way to make me a bread, I should at least go by and pick it up. So headed that.
They weren't going out of their way to make you a bread. They were making everybody bread. And she wouldn't have turned anybody down.
That way. And got there just in the nick of time. They were just finishing up in the kitchen cleaning, and Robin, another lady, children.
I don't know who the other lady is that he's referring to, and I don't need to know who the children are.
They had made a plate of this bread already buttered and warmed and cut, and it was like, oh yeah. So that little
Does that bother anybody else when he says that?
drive-in window like at the church, so I was outside. So they opened up the window, and I got to enjoy little bread snack. And
okay, it sounds like he just went there to see Robin, because he said he went there and then there was some other big event that he was gonna go to, but he went there and then he left to go to this other event, and then he came back to pick up his bread through a drive-through window. So was he even really did he even really participate in anything while he was there, or did he really just go to see Robin?
And real nice people. They all seemed very nice there. Everybody I've met at that church seems very nice. And then they gave me my loaf of bread. And I headed on back. finished up what I was doing, and I mean, it was pretty late by then in the evening, and pretty well that ended the day with that nice treat. And that's how I met Rob.
He was way too excited about this loaf of bread.
Robin the second time.
That's how I met Robin the second time. So now he's clarifying that this is how he met Robin the second time. That's where it got confusing in the beginning.
I've been in that church once before years ago. I went for something. They were having some interesting seminar or something. And that was long time ago.
Yeah, yo, main girl, he is really weird. He's really strange, and he says and does a lot of strange things, especially in these journey videos.
So it's the first time I've been back up there. And like I said, everybody there was extremely nice and thoughtful.
He always talks about how everybody's so extremely nice and thoughtful. He always wants to be brown-nosing on everybody. He talks about how Robin is so nice and so thoughtful all the time, which I believe she is, and the people in the church probably are. But you can tell he's just trying to butter people up.
Well, of course. So, when I forgot her name, I would just call her the bread lady.
Yeah, exactly. When you forgot her name, you would just call her the bread lady. Acting like, yeah, this bothers me. It bothers me how he is so obsessed with Robin. Tim says he called Robin the bread lady for a long time. Well, not a long time, he says, which I thought was odd. Why would you think you called her the bread lady for a long time if you're telling the story of just meeting her recently? I know he corrects himself right away, but the way he just said it without thinking makes me wonder if he has known who Robin is for a long time. Maybe he never knew her name, so when he found out about the bread making, her name turned into the bread lady then. However, it is possible that Tim has known Robin for a long time, even if Robin hasn't ever known about him. I believe Robin is a good person with a good heart that could be mistaken for weak and easy to control, but at the end of the day, I think Robin is a strong-willed and strong-hearted person that cares so much for Summer. I believe Robin is Summer's best friend. I believe Robin truly wants to see Summer found safe, and I truly believe she kneels like an innocent child some nights and prays a proper and honest prayer for Summer. I think Tim could be using Robin to try to get his foot in the door with the Wells or to make himself look relevant. It is also possible that something nefarious is going on between Tim and Robin or someone in the church, but I cannot bring myself to believe that if there is something nefarious going on between Tim and Robin, that Robin even knows about it. And if there is something nefarious going on between Tim and the church, I do not believe Robin is involved, and that's my opinion. Tim says not long after this, I am assuming he means not long after meeting Robin, that he had made some contact about the case. I'm not sure exactly what he means by making contact about the case. So he must be saying that not long after meeting Robin, he talked to Robin about Summer Wells being missing. He says then that's when he met Robin's husband, who is a real solid dude. Tim, of course, knows he is going to make a bunch of videos, but doesn't remember the order of events that happened. Again, even though he is there with his gear taking video and pictures, he cannot seem to remember what happened exactly. Tim says Robin was friendly from day one. He talks a lot about Robin being nice and friendly. If I was Robin, I would be totally creeped out by Tim. Tim says he was in the area photographing, and he thinks he saw some sort of invite for the church picnic. He must have seen it on a sign or something and assumed Robin would be there. So he decided he better go because Robin's husband would be there, which he must have just assumed, and he wanted to meet Robin's husband. That seemed like a big deal to him. He seems to have a slight obsession with Robin, in my opinion. She is a very beautiful young woman with so many great attributes. I can see why Tim would be drawn to her, but he seems overly drawn specifically to Robin, in my opinion. He says this was in July, around the time the Interview Room came out with their first 2 interviews in 2021 with Candace. He said he thought those interviews were great until Chris said what he said, because that's going to cause all kinds of bad stuff. I wonder what exactly he is referring to. What exactly did Chris say, Tim? What bad stuff? He says he knows people were shocked by the home, but people just don't know the area. He says it was not the point to him about the home being messy. He said that didn't bother him. Well, I don't think Chris McDonough said it bothered him either, and he didn't make it seem like it bothered him. In fact, he made Candace feel pretty comfortable, I thought. Lots of people around there live like that, Tim says. Well, Tim, it would have been nice for the children to at least have a rug. You can't tell me Don being a drywall, and with all the help they could have got from the churches, they couldn't have got a carpet or at least a couple big rugs. I'm sure the house could have been a little more child-friendly. It bothers me. Messy is one thing, dangerous is another. That property is just straight up dangerous, in my opinion, and we saw that through Chris McDonough, so I appreciate those interviews that he did. But Tim can't stand Chris McDonough. He has a huge problem with him, and every chance that he can get, he takes a jab at him. Every time.
So for a long time, she was the bread lady, or not a long time, until I finally remembered, oh, it's Robin, the bread lady.
Hey, no.
And very nice. And I don't think it was long right after that. I don't know, made some contact, something about the case. I can't remember exactly, but got to go up to the park.
He can't remember exactly. May have made some contact about the case. I would love to know what he's talking about right there. It might seem really insignificant, but I want to know what contact about may have made some contact about the case. What do you mean right there?
She was at the park with her family, so I got to go up and meet her husband.
She was trying to enjoy some time with her family at the park, and you walked up to her with all your crap and tried to talk to her family while she was trying to enjoy a day at the park.
And get to know him. Real nice people. He's nice. Solid guy. Very solid.
How did you know she was there?
And so that was not long after that. I can't remember the exact order of how those events happened, but it was good to meet him. And the bread was delicious. And Robin was friendly from day one. And
here he goes again, talking about how Robin is so friendly, which I'm sure she is.
Continues to be that way. Church is very nice. When I've seen other people, oh, that's what it was. It was a church. They were having a church picnic, and I think there was like an invite or something like that, or if you want to come by or something. I can't remember. And I was in the area photographing and thought, oh, well, yeah, I should zoom by because I definitely wanted to meet.
Of course, he just so happened to be in the area photographing.
Meet her husband, and
he's like, oh, yeah, I wanted to swing by and meet her husband.
Then that was just a little bit of time, just a little after the bread. Fun Fest was over at the end of that week. That was there in July. And
you notice how he's like really choppy with his information, but he's trying to present himself as a professional that runs a website that you think you would want to be on your P's and Q's and be on your A game and be ready to go and be on the ball when you're running a website for a missing child.
That is around the time I started listening to, I think I came across the YouTube. It was the interview room.
I almost want to speed this up because he talks so slow.
I think that was the first thing I heard.
Of course, he thinks it was the interview room. I think that was the first thing I heard. No, that's just what you want to talk about.
I have my own thoughts on that.
We know.
Which I thought that was excellent at the time. until he came to a certain spot, and I could tell when he said what he said that it just was going to probably cause all sorts of bad stuff.
It really bothers me what he's about to say, because the spot of all things that he could point out. Oh, I ended it right there, because he talks about how Don was he thinks some people are saying that Don was in the shed. Well, Chris McDonough never said that Don was in the shed. He said he could have been, but that's because a bunch of people were saying that they thought he was in there. So he was like, I don't know, he could have been, like maybe he was in there. Maybe he did come out and say, you know what, I think Don might have been in there. So what? He was up there filming. He's allowed to say what he thinks on his own channel. Come on. And you can say what you think too, but you're representing a missing child in your own words. That's what you say you're doing. So if that's what you say you're doing, you shouldn't be, that would be like airing out your dirty laundry on findsummerwells.com. That's not cool. You can't do that, Tim. Tim starts talking about people all having individual skill sets and how some are not meant to be public. This way, the flaws show. So it's meant to be a private skill set. Then Tim talks about there being a learning curve. He is talking about Candace. He says, unfortunately, a lot of people get hurt in this one. Who? What is he talking about? Summer? Got hurt, Tim? How? It bothers me when people can't give specific examples. If you're going to call someone or something out, do it all the way. Don't whisper it to him. If you have a message, make it clear, please.
I'll just put it this way. Sometimes somebody has a skill set that's not made to be used publicly. And when it's used publicly, its flaws show real fast why it was never made to be a public skill set. It was always made to be a private skill set. But there's learning curves. Unfortunately, a lot of people got hurt in this.
If you're skilled at something, why would it matter that you're skilled at it in public or in private? You're still going to be skilled at the same thing, whether you're in public or not.
Certain learning curve. And it continues to resonate.
There's a certain learning curve that continues to resonate.
So, it was the news. It was the parade. And it was making bread. And meeting Robin. Meeting her family, meeting her church family. So these were the initial pieces that were slowly.
So is he saying Summer's church family right there? Hold up.
Slowly drawing me closer to this whole case and this situation. It had already touched my heart just watching the banner in the parade.
So strange and weird how do you get so drawn into something just by watching someone walk a banner in a parade? Like, you're an old... I have a lot to say that I'm not going to say. Right, this second. Now Tim goes on to part 4 of his journey. He kicks it off talking about and showing footage of himself at and inside of Bays Mountain Park and Planetarium. He says he loves the place, which already by now we all know. Tim has an apparent obsession with Bays Mountain. He says it's Bays Mountain's 50th anniversary. Tim says we went from the news to the Fun Fest parade and meeting Candace with the banner, went to photograph the making bread and met the other lady that was with Candace, and that turned out to be Robin. Touched on a few things there, he says. One of the things we touched on was the next step of what I had come across in this journey of Summer Wells, says Tim. He says somehow, and of course he doesn't remember how, it might have just popped up on a Google search, and that was the YouTubers and all the various different shows, he says. The first one was Chris McDonough, according to Tim. He then says he can't remember who he heard first, Chris or one of the others. He says it was somewhere in the time frame of the YouTubings and people telling Don to get quiet. He says he remembers then thinking they would go insane not having some way to communicate. He says way back in his mind he had the idea of a website where Don and Candace could go to release their thoughts during such a horrible time. He says it was somewhere in there when he got the idea for the website. I think he had an idea in the forefront of his mind all along. That or it's a front for something nefarious. I would be very interested to know who all Tim knows. He then says he was working in the woods. There were a lot of trees cut down from the ash bugs. He says this out of nowhere, randomly. He says he thinks they took down 10 trees in one spot. He was cutting wood, listening to the YouTubians, and it was very apparent to him how Don was being utilized. He decides to then discuss Chris McDonough again. He says he saw better what this family was up against. I think what he was trying to say was he saw what they were up against being the big news channels, and I think he is considering Chris McDonough mainstream media. He says Don and Candace were very inexperienced with YouTube and social media. However, I don't believe that. Inexperienced in social media? No, we know that's not true, especially for Candace. He says the mainline media would make the YouTubers look like they weren't relevant, basically. He says the main media is the entertainment industry, and he could see what they were trying to do to Don and Candace. Then Tim gets a call from who he says is Candace that interrupts the video. Then Tim gets a call. He then comes back on and says, oh no, it wasn't Candace. It was someone who hacked her stuff and called me from her number. Okay, I don't even believe that. Why would he have Candace's number? He then quickly jumps back into talking about Chris. He refers back to the private skill sets, where you can put your own thoughts and opinion without it being public where people can pick you apart. That doesn't make sense to me. Hear it for yourself because his language is important to hear.
And here comes a call. It's Candace. Well, that was interesting. It was not her. It was...
He's so weird about, oh, you should never record phone calls and stuff. But why are you...
I think I was talking about, I know these videos just are absolute, brilliant entertainment feasts as I talk, but it's a little too crap.
He sounds completely full of himself when he says this.
Got it up here, so it's slowed me down. Videos just are absolute, brilliant entertainment feasts as I talk, but it's a little too crowded up here, so it's slowed me down.
What?
We were discussing Mr. McDonough. Public figure gets to be spoken about publicly.
He says it slowed me down because he's getting himself so worked up talking about Chris McDonough because he knows Chris McDonough is an ex-cop and he was really good at what he did and he might have messed up a little, I don't know. I don't know that much about him. I know he did what he did, and I know he does what he does now. And what he does now, he has compassion for, and he really, truly does want to find Summer, and he actually uncovered a lot, and I appreciate that. And as far as if he wants to go on and try and exploit Mary and Jeannie a little bit, I mean, they are grown women, but at the same time, they might not realize what they're getting themselves into, and he does, so he should probably be a little more protective of them in that way, but that's just my opinion. Tim Mullen can't stand the guy.
Though politely. I have nothing against the man. He's probably a great guy. My personal opinion, though, is this, and I think I said it the other day.
Nobody cares.
and that is that people who have skill sets that were made for private conference rooms at police stations, that's kind of where those skill sets are made for. So there you can say your own thoughts, your own opinions, and it's okay, because that's what you have to do in a case. You got to discuss every angle.
Or instead of trying to have private and public skill sets, you can just have integrity and be an adult.
Every little nudge, every little intuition, every, the experience of all your rodeos that you've been in.
I'm all about nature, and I love the water and the trees and everything, but I feel like I see the stuff around what he's recording, and I feel like he could get way better footage besides like the same tree branch. Like I can look out my window and see that,
However, when you bring that skill set out into the public arena and start saying those things, it is brutal, because to you, you're just giving an opinion, but your viewers are like sheep, and many of them are like wolves, and they hear.
And they all got to see Summer's face and her home where she lived.
What you just said, and it's like a napalm bomb. You can look that up. They said it wrong.
He probably did say it wrong. He then goes on to talk about what he finds to be wrong with Chris McDonough, as you can hear. His opinion is that Chris went wrong by giving his opinion, speculating and intuition on the Summer Wells case. He hates, in my opinion, that Chris seems to have a strong dislike for Don. Considering how Don let his family live when he was the one working and making money and he was the provider of material things, not providing any material things, that may have been a start for Chris. I don't know. I doubt he just right out of the gate thought Don was a predator for no reason. There were probably a lot of things that led up to Chris thinking that, in my opinion. Chris does have past experience working with straight-up predators. No matter what you think of the guy, he obviously has a passion for what he does. Don's obvious lifestyle, his public lifestyle, for one, doesn't make him look like a loving father and husband, in my opinion. He makes himself look nervous and suspicious. He says foul and vile things about and regarding Summer and his family in general. He is not a man, in my opinion. Don is what I would call an F-boy, because he just F's around and never takes care of his business, meaning his family and himself. He doesn't seem like a man with any integrity or dignity. He strikes me as a hopeless drug addict that never wanted to have a life because he never cared enough to be sober long enough to realize the value of life itself. I don't think Don has any regard for the innocence of children, and that is a huge red flag to me, because he is Summer Moon Utah Wells' father, and she is still missing. Tim defends Don a lot. Tim doesn't know Don any more than he knows Chris McDonough, as far as I know, as far as he makes it apparent enough for me to know. The way Tim talks, you would think he befriended Don and in a way almost idolizes him because he is Summer's father. That's creepy enough alone, not to mention Don is not a good man. He is not someone Tim should be so forthcoming about defending and so eager to defend. It's not a good look for you or your business, Tim, and that's all my opinion, which we all, every one of us entitled to. I just so happen to be aware that I think Tim Mullen is suspicious in regards to Summer Wells being missing, and I've followed this case virtually every day since June 16th, 2021. The reason why I find Tim suspicious was initially and is mostly based on these journey videos. So let me get through these. So Tim is talking about Chris McDonough and how he seemed offended when Candace said he couldn't look in the shed. This is all things is what he uses as an example. Out of all the things he could use as an example, this is what he uses. Okay?
in the situation. It's just you can't start dishing out rumor, imagination, instinct, intuitions, and that's what went crooked with Mr. McDonough, and he did it. I spotted it immediately. He was doing great on his interviews until he asked about the shed, and it's like he was offended because Candace wouldn't let him go to the shed.
I don't think he seemed offended at all when Candace asked him, when he asked Candace if he could go to the shed, and Candace was like, no, it's messy in there or whatever. I don't even let the boys go play in there. Nobody seemed offended.
And I saw right then, I said, the man has stepped out of just an interviewer and he's in his...
So just because he asked if he could go in that shed and he was like, okay, that's cool. When Candace said no, he was just like, no worries. He didn't press her on it or nothing. She didn't even really say no. I don't think she ever said no. I think she was just kind of like, and Chris kind of felled it out, and he was like, okay, she doesn't want me to, so I'm not going to. All right, cool. That's all it was.
And he's in his investigators skill set that's only for an investigator that's actually on the case, not on a guest at someone's house.
Whoa. So this is supposed to be for a skill set that's not a guest at somebody's house. First of all, he's not coming there with a badge saying he's a police officer. So he's not coming there to interrogate them. So what you're trying to say is his skill set from something else shouldn't be there at the house. But why? Why wouldn't you want that there anyways? Even if he did walk up there with a badge, who cares if you hate the guy? He's got so many people watching him, seeing Summer's face and hearing the story and hearing the story, what they want to believe. Yeah, the speculation, what they want to believe. Who cares? As long as the TBI is doing their job, that's all that matters. Okay, Tim? We don't need you to tell us Chris McDonough's not a real cop and he was out of line going up there. We don't need the boys to hear that. They need to know that he was a good man and he was a cop and he did try and do a lot to help find Summer. Don't put it in their heads that he was trying not to help just because he put their dad on Front Street. Maybe his dad needs to own up to that and clean himself up a little bit. You ever think of that?
For him to get upset not getting to see that shed would be like me going to visit someone and then immediately saying, I want to go upstairs and look in your closet.
That would not be the same. That would not be even close to the same thing.
I want to see what's in your closet. I mean, that is rude maximum.
Maximum rude, he says.
Now, I don't know if he meant that. I just think he tipped over back into his, amazing skills, but in the wrong place. And the second he did that, he ignited.
Why are you trying to puff your chest out at Chris McDonough?
The question mark. But this question mark is full of gasoline. And so now everybody listening suspects. I mean, who really cares? I'm going to be straight. Who cares?
So he's trying to say Chris started a fire by asking some questions or causing people to ask some questions by the questions that he asked?
Who cares if Don was in that shed or not? It's his house. He has a perfect right not to talk to some stranger.
Yeah, who does care if Don was in that shed or not? He never made a big deal about it until after it all happened and he thought maybe he was in there. Why would he try and hide from him? I mean, come on, Tim. We don't know where Summer is. People are going to ask these questions, and especially when you turn around hating on him when he's got Summer's face out there and you don't, that makes you look suspicious.
He doesn't want to. That's not devious or horrible. So it was way out of line. And there's where it collapsed. Unfortunately, it couldn't be repaired. And unfortunately, instead of just letting it drift by or him coming on saying, hey, I shouldn't have done that, he fed it in his analysis. And it began to grow. And then it was...
Why should he have to come on and apologize? He didn't do anything wrong.
Fixable.
There's nothing to fix.
Immediately made everybody.
The only person making it a problem is you, Tim.
Guilty. Devious and secret, and everybody having to use their cliches, and But I'll say another thing.
He's the one using his cliches.
Who cares if I say it? But I'll say, speaking of cliche lines, another point. If I remember correctly, in one of those interviews, I heard Mr. McDonough begin to express about how his child, maybe his daughter, I don't know. I think he said he was in the house and he saw a van or something pull up. And
it was his son, and he almost got kidnapped.
They were basically, or some vehicle to try to kidnap his own daughter. And he ran out like a man would do to cook the guy's goose fast. The guy got away.
To cook the guy's goose fast.
And from then on, if I remember right, I think he said that was an inspiration for him and what his career would be. That was one of those. It is.
Of course, it was an inspiration for him where his career would be. That would be for anybody.
Moments in life that happens, that triggers, your destiny per se.
And
it gives the inspiration for what will be there, and the skill set you choose to perfect and utilize to help people.
The skill set that you perfect, that you use to utilize to help people. Well, what's your skill set, Tim? What are you trying to perfect? Because nobody's perfect. Tim goes on to talk about how Chris McDonough set Don up for a public lynching, which I think Don did all by himself. He says that was very unprofessional of Chris. I think Chris is very professional. I think Tim's the one that's not professional. He says Chris has no clue really what has gone on in Don's life. Does Tim know? Because the allegations are pretty horrendous, and Don has basically admitted to and shown us most of it to be true. Yet Tim defends him solely because why? He's Summer's father? Shouldn't that make you automatically suspicious given statistics and the way the home was and the way Don and Candace spoke and appeared on the news? Put two and two together, Tim, and you can see they didn't have the best life for those children. That was Don's fault, and Candace's too. Don should have done more for his family. That much is obvious to me. Summer is missing, and only the person or persons responsible know why. Until I know why, or until law enforcement knows why, I will never stop looking for answers for Summer. Tim, you have admitted that this is for entertainment and people will eat it up. Is that truly all this is? That cannot be. It just does not make sense. You're a cryptic man. You seem to want to appear to be a simple man with quirks, yet I find you very complicated and off-putting. It is my opinion that you can judge a man based on a couple stories, although Tim goes on to say you can't. He says Don's family has been exposed by Chris. That is not true. I find Chris's footage to be very important. Tim seems to be very frustrated with Chris's overall work. He goes on to say Don and Candace have nothing to do with Summer's case. How would he know that? He says if they really are innocent of this case, then he says, he's saying everything very quickly. How would he know that, though? If Don is innocent or not. No one knows that. He says if they really are innocent of this case, and then out of nowhere, he says SA is really the big thing to say in this case. Then he mocks it. He says it's all speculation. He says, say. No, Tim, it's called sexual assault, and it's a real thing, and it's not something that you mock. He says it's all speculation. No, actually, that isn't. He says he respects law enforcement to the max, yet he refers to Chris as not real law enforcement, even though he is. He's just retired. He's still real law enforcement. So I think this was his way of saying he doesn't respect Chris without really saying it. He then talks about dopamine and people needing their fix. It's addictive. He says Chris's fixation on destroying Don is due to his addiction to it, basically. He then goes on to talk disrespectfully about Don's stepsisters. It gets pretty gross for a minute. If you have to hear this part, you have to hear this part for yourself, because he begins himself speaking on rumors and speculation about Summer and Don, just like he complains about other people doing.
Because most of the reason people like this stuff is because it does give a fix. It gives a emotional dopamine fix, which is a thrill, which is addicting. It's addictive. That's why crime stories are so exciting. It gives a fix in a boring world or a crazy world. And it's like anything that inspires dopamine, it can become addictive. And
yeah, it is like anything that can cause your dopamine receptors to activate. It's addictive. We all know that, Tim. We all know what you're trying to say here. You're trying to say that Chris McDonough is addicted to trying to bring down Don, and that is not true.
When you have somebody of the experience and caliber,
he's trying to find Summer.
As Mr. McDonough suddenly become gossip and rumors and thoughts of imagination, and he'll destroy.
I'm not sitting here saying I'm all for Chris McDonough. I already said what I think about him. I'm saying I respect the man because he's trying to help find Summer.
One man with words, but he'll believe a woman who comes up with, and I should rephrase that, not believe, but allow a woman that comes up with outright horrendous imaginations of how Summer was daily being abused in a shed, and he won't put a stop to it, but just allows it to be said, acting as if he's just the interviewer. But not.
He is just the interviewer, and it's his channel. He can allow whatever he wants to be said. You don't have to listen to that.
Stopping it.
And I think that was really relevant, because if you've got family saying stuff like that, that should say a lot about the person they're talking about being Don.
No conception of what that does to families. When you're living in hell every night because you don't know what's happening to your daughter, and you've got to hear stuff like that, and people are believing it, and then the sun sets, and then you start thinking, what if that's what's happening to her? And there's no proof, no vindication, just total crazy rumor. The guy that lets it be played and doesn't stop it, he's responsible.
Wow. Hold on.
Because you don't know what's happening to your daughter, and you've got to hear stuff like that, and people are believing it, and then the sun sets, and then you start.
You've got to hear stuff like that? What? Like stuff that you did yourself that people are saying and calling you out on, and you got to hear stuff like that? You got to hear about your own shit that you did to yourself?
Are thinking, what if that's what's happening to her? When there's no proof, no vindication, just total crazy rumor. The guy that lets it be played and doesn't.
How does he know this is all total crazy rumor? He's just walking around constantly defending Don about all this sexual assault rumors, but then he goes on and mocks and says, "Essay, sa, 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 say, 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 say." You can't do that, Tim.
Doesn't stop it, he's responsible. And so,
how does that make him responsible?
So yes, I hold Mr. McDonough completely responsible for some horrendous things that were done, horrendous things that hurt people.
But he's not going to give an actual example.
And it's not really fixable. I mean, he could fix it himself with apologies. Bad learning curve. Hope it's a learning curve. Hope he's
again with the learning curve. He's going to throw that in there again.
Realized, oops.
He sounds just like Jody Sue when he says that.
But you don't do that. You don't allow bad learning curve. Hope it's a learning curve. Hope he's realized, oops.
Oops. Jody.
But you don't do that. You don't allow insane imaginations. Not that the person's insane, but the imagination, it goes so crazy that it comes up with a story that...
I thought you were all about free speech, Tim.
Every day the daughter can be dropped off in a shed for men to have her, and like nobody knows it. Boys don't know.
Yeah, that's not something you just advertise, Tim, you dumbass.
And nobody knows it. It just gets insane. But it feeds those who can't control their emotions, who also have the power of YouTube if they want to use it. And before you know it, you've got guys threatening his life.
I want to know
we
who
all know
was
about all
threatening.
that.
No, we don't.
People
we don't all know
twice
about
in the
all
same
that.
few sentences say they want to pull their 9mm and put it to his head.
Yeah.
Who's guilty?
Okay. The person that
guilty?
said
I'm
that,
not saying Mr.
the person that said that is guilty. That is not Chris McDonough's fault. And you're going to sit here and say, who's guilty? Who's guilty? Well, I'm not saying he's guilty. Then what are you saying?
McDonough's guilty for that. But I'm saying once it's ignited by someone of a professional status, us rookies, especially those who suddenly have a little influence using a YouTube channel, they start inspiring those of mental deficiency who mental deficiency using a YouTube channel. They start inspiring those of mental deficiency.
What is he talking about right there? They start inspiring people of mental deficiency. Like, is he being serious or is he being sarcastic or what? I don't understand what he means right there. I never did understand what he meant right there. Tim goes on to talk about how Don and Candace behavior just fed the wolves. He says people just drag Don and Candace and there's no respect online. He thinks there should be no way you should be able to play someone's private phone call publicly on social media. He says that ain't free speech. He says we all talk a lot different on the phone. He says McDonough bringing up the shed and Summer possibly being essayed in there was what ruined him. He goes on saying the same things over and over for a few minutes. Says people can see things with their eyes but not understand why. He says he started to get angry when he saw what YouTubers were doing to Don, playing on his vulnerabilities. He said women would woo Don to tell them till he let down his guard. Women would woo Don to them till he let down his guard, so he would be open and honest, but it was all bogus and fake, which he says was so obvious and so clear. But he is so wrong on that, because if he's talking about Cher, she did not do anything to woo him. He was the one that would keep coming back and wanting to talk to her. And of course she was going to talk to him and give him a platform because she wants to find Summer. He said women would woo Don to them till he let down his guard so he would be open and honest, but it was all bogus and fake, which he says was so obvious and so clear. Okay, then give an example. Tim says they, being the media, I assume, were using Don for entertainment, even though they say they're doing it to help find Summer. I wish he would say the people's names, because a lot of people wanted to talk to Don who also really wanted to help find Summer. He continues to talk about how the news is just entertainment, based on advertising and money. He says Don was being used for entertainment purposes. He says Don was pushed to do bad things by YouTubers. He says the night of the DUI, he was pushed. No, Don did all those things on his own. And he's not being used for entertainment purposes. He's making a spectacle of himself. Even though Don made those decisions that night all on his own, he said these decisions can all be washed away. He says this, he isn't going to try to make Don look like a saint, but it is a pattern that would happen, that Don is pushed and tricked into getting himself in trouble. How is he tricked into getting himself in trouble? He asks how many of Don's bad decisions were made because he was pushed. You sound like a sick-minded individual to me, Tim, because you're allegedly speaking to children in the making these. You're defending someone who is being accused of sexually assaulting their own sisters, and you mock sexual assault, which is extremely disrespectful to survivors of sexual assault. You imply that Don was pushed and tricked into all the trouble he has been in. Do you know how much of a brown noser you sound like right now and how disgusting it is? You're trying to get as personal as you can with a man who could have possibly harmed his daughter, for all you know, so you can get business. Is that true, Tim? Are you just trying to get close to Don for business? Tim goes on to talk about how YouTubers are damaging the case and hurting Don and Candace, and he says YouTubers are pushing people to suicide. He says people lose their lives because of being attacked online. He says you're innocent until proven guilty, but it's not up to social media to solve a case. No, it's not, but they do, and they can, and they will. He says, like I told one investigator, I don't put jello on anything that Don decided to do on his own. Whatever the hell that means. I've never heard anybody say that before.
Havoc. Absolutely havoc. It's dangerous, it's horrible, and it causes more damage on more damage. And every time it would do it, yes, Don would get on to try to counter it. Because he's sitting there trying to keep his sanity and not think about his daughter being abused, in some other guy's shed. And
wow. Okay. Yeah.
It just spreads. And so then what do they do? Then they take what he says in his fits of response, and then they use that against him. And neither knows how to stop.
Who cares who's using what against who? As long as Summer's face is out there and we're trying to stick to the facts and we're trying to actually do something to try and find answers, sitting there and coddling her parents isn't going to help find shit.
They point their finger at Don all day long about him. But no, I'm sorry. They're on total equal ground because they couldn't stop either.
How does he know they're on totally equal ground? And what does he mean by they couldn't stop either?
They had to feed it.
Because he couldn't stop Don and you couldn't stop Chris because they're both unstoppable forces, apparently.
The entertainment like wolves. Gorgeous wolf. And I'm not saying they're wolves, but their behavior feeds that tendency.
He keeps showing these wolves throughout this video.
Of a pack. And doesn't take much.
He's always got to tie in whatever he's showing to the case somehow.
Studies you can read on the pack mentality. It's like a mob rule spreads. And YouTube is one of the worst. Because the restraint factors.
Does this remind anybody else of Xaname?
Aren't in place fully yet. Most YouTube does is, say a few initials and maybe you can get by with something. And they've got a few other restrictions, but there's not restrictions that need to be done of a much higher caliber. And I think we should all totally agree on that.
Man, he is like totally for censorship and stuff.
There should be no way that you can play somebody's
Allegedly.
Private telephone call publicly on social media without their permission.
Something might not be morally right. You might not think, hey, that might not be morally right. For some people, maybe not, maybe so, depending on what's on the phone call, I guess. But I mean, people are going to have integrity or not. It shouldn't be illegal though. Illegal, like totally against the law. You could potentially be prosecuted for playing somebody else's phone. Come on.
That's a no-brainer. You can fight it all day long till it's you. me.
You can get people for harassment. You can get people for slander, libel. You don't need that law, Tim.
No, that ain't free speech.
Yeah, it is.
Free speech is the phone call.
And that too.
In Tennessee, we're allowed, as long as one person agrees to it being recording, which could be me, let's say I call you, then that's legal. I can do that. Just one person. I don't even have to tell you I'm doing it. But
yeah, we know. We
until
get it.
social media came, that wasn't going to get blasted to the whole world. And phone calls are not the real person. We're talking to little machines when we're on the phone, and we'll say
when you're on the phone, you're still talking to a real person.
Things, we'll respond in certain ways. We'll do lots of things that aren't the same as when we're in person.
We also do a lot of things that are the same that you don't even realize you do.
And Dawn, Dawn would do the YouTube. And that's...
How do you know how different Dawn is off of YouTube and on YouTube?
It's really where we're trying to hold it at right now is the great interviews of Chris McDonough, except for the shed, which, there's a Bible scripture, a little leaven, a little yeast. Leaven's the whole lump. Just takes a little.
I'm not going to lie. I don't know what he's talking about right here. I'm not religious like that. Not against religion. Totally open-minded. Just not. I was never educated on the Bible, so you'll just have to kind of listen on this part.
The shed was the leaven. It destroyed the 2 wonderful loaves of bread. Those 2 interviews would have really been good.
They were good.
For Candace to welcome you into her home. That was a woman welcoming you into her home, into her life, into her yard. You were a guest.
That wasn't much of a home, Tim. And there's a missing child. That's why he was invited. He wasn't invited into her home for dinner to come kick it and hang out on the porch and drink sweet tea.
She didn't know. If I'd known her then, I would have said, don't. Because this guy might be great. But if he puts it out there, others will tear it apart.
Who cares if the parents get tore apart as long as they find their daughter? At this point, they've done it to themselves.
Don't understand the lifestyle of this area. People that don't understand why. They can see things with their eyes, but they don't understand why. And
you can see things with your eyes, but not understand why. That's deep. I actually get that.
Well,
one thing he said this whole time so far that I can actually relate to.
Always judge on our own convictions and blah, blah, blah. On it goes. I won't analyze that.
He wants to analyze people judging people on their past convictions. Why?
So I saw that, and then I saw, remember, I'm out in the woods cutting wood and usually on this stuff. I found myself starting to get angry when I started to listen to others that Don was calling into, because I saw what they were doing. Oh, it was so obvious. I didn't even know.
Oh, it was so obvious. I just saw right what they were doing, but what were they doing? Because I think it was Don that was doing it all to himself.
I know the man, but I saw it so clear. They were playing on his vulnerability.
What's that?
And since most would be women, they would essentially go into mode and would just woo him right to him until he let down his guard.
How does he know what Don's vulnerabilities are?
And he would try to open up and be honest. whether.
And how does he know that that's what was going through Don's mind? Why is he speaking for Don?
He was whiskeyed or not. And it was all bogus and fake. And
many of the YouTube creators were bogus and fake, he says. What, like you?
And that was just so clear. And that was so obvious and so clear. They were using him for entertainment.
No, they're trying to find Summer.
And they're
trying to get him to talk.
We're doing this to help find Summer.
They're trying to get him to talk. They are doing this to try and help find Summer. Stupid.
Yeah. That'll be another topic.
Yeah, he had to end that real quick, huh? Tim goes on to talk about how Don was just being used by YouTubers. He talks about how law enforcement is a billion miles ahead of us in technology. He basically calls YouTubers rookies, which he says is an office of inexperience. There's no psychological training for YouTube. It's just one big gigantic learning curve party, and humans are the toy of the party. He says these YouTube rookies are aggravating the situation, whether they mean well or not. He says you shouldn't pound someone who has weaknesses. You may think you're doing a service of some sort, but you're not really listening because law enforcement tells you you're not helping. He also says they're pushing people to suicide. He says maybe in their mind they think they're helping, but those that know best are telling you you're damaging the case. But what are you doing to help, Tim? I believe you have probably done more bad than good yourself. You're supposedly making this for the children. Do they really need this? And who is he talking about exactly? Why won't he name them? Is he trying to imply that Chris is pushing people to off themselves? That's absurd. If someone was doing something that terrible, wouldn't you want to do people a favor and let them know who to watch out for? Tim asks how many of Don's decisions were made because he was pushed.
They were using him. And it was so clear. And unfortunately, quite a few of them just don't like law enforcement to start with. And that's what killed me, too, because I have a huge respect for law enforcement.
Nope. He does try to be so deep, doesn't he? But, it's just a bunch of... Like, when you actually try and break down the deep things that he says, it, kind of is just a big roundabout. Like, he could have just simply said one simple thing. It's not actually deep. He just has a way of making it sound long and deep, but it's not really.
A billion miles past any of us and what they can do these days.
Law enforcement's a billion miles past what we can do nowadays. They probably are.
The science is huge. Technology is huge. Their experience is huge. Not rookies just asking questions thinking they're going to find the answer.
So basically what I'm getting out of this is that he's saying Chris McDonough is a rookie just asking questions thinking they're going to find the answer. So what if he even was, but he's not. But he is just trying to find some answers. What's so wrong with that? Why are you so upset that Don got put out on blast?
And that's not a bad word, rookies. It just means, good grief, put me on a ball field with
okay.
Professional ball team, and I'm the rookie.
He's trying to
rookie.
Be as polite as possible.
It's a office
about saying he hates Chris and doesn't have any respect for him.
And there's no training for YouTube creators, how to be a YouTube creator. There's no psychological training on how they can affect people sociologically.
Chris McDonough is not a rookie, Tim.
Training on how they can affect people
He doesn't need psychological training on how YouTube can affect people. I'm pretty sure he's well aware of that.
It's just one big, gigantic learning curve party. But these are humans. Humans are the toy of the party.
The humans are the toy of the party. See, he's trying to sound deep, and it's just cheesy.
And I'm not saying there's not sincerity, but it's sincerity of a rookie. They don't know what they're doing.
He's not a rookie.
They do not know the damage.
Voices behind the wall share. She's not a rookie. Angel talks too fast. She's not a rookie. Chris McDonough, he's not a rookie. All these people know exactly what they're doing, and they're all trying to help find Summer. And you're not. You're trying to keep her face out of the mainstream media to protect Don.
They're aggravating the situation. Especially somebody who's...
They're aggravating what situation? Don's situation? Shouldn't Don's situation be the fact that he's missing his daughter?
Battled anyway in their life. You know, you don't pound someone who's already has weaknesses, because you'll push him over the edge. And you think you're doing a service of some sort. Maybe it's just to your audience. Maybe in your mind you actually think you're helping. But you're not really listening because law enforcement tells you you're not.
He is law enforcement. He's just retired.
Helping. So.
And they told Cher that, basically, they told Cher that she was helping, basically. They told her, yeah, keep doing what you're doing when she was talking to Don. And they knew exactly what she was doing. They watch her stuff, I guarantee it.
There's really no way to wiggle out of it. Those who know best are telling you you're damaging it. You're damaging the case.
Those that know best are not telling anybody specifically. They came out and said people on YouTube or on social media that are calling in rumors and speculation, not to call in with rumors and speculation. And those that are, I'm not going to hate on them because the TBI has a job to do, and they said they didn't need any outside help. So.
And not only damaging the case, but you're pushing people to suicide.
That's a little extreme, Tim.
And then when people try to step in to help these people from losing their own life because of the attacks of unprofessional.
I would love to know who he's calling unprofessional, because Chris McDonough, whether you like him or not, he is very professional, in my opinion. Now, has he made mistakes? Yeah, of course. Nobody's perfect. I don't love the guy. I don't hate the guy. I like him, but nobody's perfect. But he is very professional.
Don't have to be professional, just experienced with humans. Kindness, consideration. Not to mention, guilty until proven innocent, which isn't what it says. Yes, you're innocent.
Yeah, it's innocent until proven guilty. We get what you're trying to say. Come on.
Until proven guilty, but there's people who are the ones that do that proof. And they're good at it. And
he literally just talks shit about Chris for ever.
Yeah. Occasionally something good pops out of social media. Investigators in YouTube.
Yeah, occasionally missing people are found.
YouTubers, but that literally would be the needle in that.
You can't just rely on a local news channel and a billboard, Tim.
Haystack, very rare. So it's entertainment.
There are certain healthy speculations, certain healthy speculations and speculating in the right way and being smart and responsible about it is what's keeping her face out there.
That's the industry. YouTube entertainment industry. News is entertainment industry. Dr. Phil is entertainment industry. It's just how it works. I'm not saying that in a negative way. That's just how it all works.
You don't have to clarify that you're not saying it in a negative way. We get that. It's just how it works. It can be negative. It can be very negative.
It's based on advertising and money. And that's just how it works.
Get that advert revenue.
That's a reality.
Yep.
So,
and
yes, Don especially was being used for entertainment purposes.
No, so that doesn't tie together, what you just said.
Did it push him where he's at right now?
Where?
Everybody will just have to decide that on their own.
What do you mean, did it push him to where he's at right now? I think his whole entire life has pushed him to where he's at right now.
DUI, he was pushed.
All the decisions that Don has made his entire life is what has pushed him to be where he is right now. Chris McDonough has brought that all to light for us. I wouldn't have known any of that without Chris McDonough. All I would know is the fool that he's made of himself on YouTube.
Like I told one investigator, I don't put jello on anything that Don decided to do on his own. You know, whether people knew about it or didn't know about it in his life during these many months. During these many months, decided to do on his own. Like I told one investigator, I don't put jello on anything that Don decided to do on his own.
What does that mean? I've never heard anybody say that before.
You know, whether people knew about it or didn't know about it in his life during these many months.
Well, if people knew about it or didn't know about it, then there was something to know about, right?
But I know the night of the DUI, he was pushed. I saw it. I knew it.
How was he pushed that night? What do you mean by that? Why can't you ever be specific?
Because I knew him by then, and I saw the setup.
So you were spying on him or what?
And to them it was entertainment and ha-ha, and see, we kind of told you he was a no good guy. Yeah.
Who's we? And who was laughing? Nobody was sitting there hee hee ha ha. Nobody was doing that.
Sure, the great judge will see it that way. Currently, there's always room for forgiveness. And then those things can be washed away.
Okay, that just sounds creepy when he says that.
But it hadn't happened yet. So yeah, I will say that. Putting nothing else aside, not trying to make Don anything, some kind of saint. He won't even do that to himself. He knows better than that. But I will say this. He was pushed that night. He was pushed. He was tricked and he was pushed.
How was he tricked and pushed? And if he was doing something bad that he shouldn't have been doing, then wasn't that his fault?
And it was a pattern that would happen. And let me make it clear. I ain't putting jello on any decision because he still made the decisions. But the question is how much of those decisions were made because he was pushed.
Wow. How many of those decisions were made because he was pushed, you guys? I'm sorry, but if somebody pushes you to make a decision and you go ahead and make that decision, that was still your decision that you made on your own. So, all right. I'm going to try and come back. I don't know what the background noise was. I'm not sure. I didn't hear it. But I'm going to come back and do the rest of this tomorrow because I don't want to make it too long and I'm getting really, really tired. And I have part 5 completely done and I am so ready to get into that part because that part gets pretty nuts. It starts off with a waterfall. He goes on to talk about Noah's flood and there's layers and layers of earth and he just walks around showing all this rock the whole time. And we're going to get into the Find Summer Wells website and I'm going to talk a lot about that tomorrow. I'm going to try and do it in the afternoon when my baby's taking a nap. If not, I'll be back at night, probably a little bit earlier tomorrow. Thank you, Yo Main Girl and No Nope. I really appreciate you guys a lot. Like, I really, really do. You guys are great. No Nope, do you have a channel? And Lasad, thank you so much. I appreciate you guys a lot. I really do. If you're not subbed up to Yo Main Girl, she works really hard and she's a lot of fun. I would suggest going over there and subbing up to her if you're into a good time. And thank you again for being here. I've got my eyes on you, Tim, and I've got way more notes that I still need to read out. All right. Peace out.